Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future. Co-hosted by the inquisitive public speaking champion, Mike McVeigh, and energy, economics, and technology expert, Matt Jensen. Join us as we explore all things energy, economic, tech, and political, and how they will affect our future.
All right, so recently President Trump made a pretty big announcement, and I didn't remember you recording this, but I guess you recorded a prediction and that Trump would announce a new party. Was I involved in that recording?
No.
Okay, well that makes me feel a lot better because I was like, I really don't remember this. I remember you texting me about it.
Yeah, that's when you were out.
Oh, okay. I see how you are. But basically President Trump just announced that he is going to run for president again. And so let's discuss a little bit of the, I don't even know what to call it, reflections. Maybe that's probably the best word. I was going to say fallout, but we'll say reflections.
Well, no, it was interesting. I kind of my prediction was based on Trump making a rational decision and trying to get in the guy's head. But
you really haven't studied him that much, have you?
Yeah, well, I really thought that while making it. There's a eventual time to make rational decisions. So, but
okay, I almost have to pause you right there.
Yeah.
Not even on the politics side, but like just in his business life, I've done so much study around Trump that it's not like me even. This isn't even a political thing. It's just like he doesn't make the decision that anybody that. There is a logic to what he does, but it's not a logic that I think you could ever deal with because you're so concerned about like doing stuff right.
Well, this prediction was unpredictable. And I thought it was like from a power sense, it's the only way that he could really consolidate power long term. I don't really personally see a path forward for him in the next election.
No.
And he may win the Republican nomination, but also demographic wise, we're talking about 4 years more of demographics that have been not really supportive of them. And it's been something that I've been harping on for a long time, but I think generally it's been a shift in the last 2 years. I'm not an ageist, but when you are 70 plus, your brain naturally is starting to. It's more difficult to handle a job like this, especially if you've gone through health issues and stuff like that. So I just don't really see either of these options to be a good option for a commander in chief. And in my opinion, just from an age level, and there's a lot of people that will argue that, they can build a good team around them. It's about the ideological and the policy and stuff. I would prefer us to have a system maybe more along the size or along the framework of like Switzerland, where you have a executive committee running it equally, rather than just one person. But
there you go, Mr. Rational.
Yeah. But
no,
yeah.
I don't think age is as much of a barrier in certain context. I would like to say, if you look at, again, I'm not trying to be political. I'm just trying to look at it from as apolitical as possible. The team that he assembled for his first presidential run, to me, showed that even in that age frame and stuff, he was not putting together a team that was working well together. Let alone they didn't have the same, like everybody had a different agenda. In fact, I just recently read another book that talked specifically about Giuliani and his role in the presidential team.
Yeah.
And based on that alone, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but from something else I read recently, both Jared and Ivanka have kind of spaced themselves from him.
Totally.
And that might be a good thing overall, but like, I want to see some of the people that he's looking at potentially putting in charge. You know, who's his team going to be around him if he were to make a legitimate stab at being president again?
Well, I mean, Ivanka Trump, if you, in my opinion, if you go to that family, you're going to choose a Trump to be a president. She's the one that you want. But
right. And if she's spacing herself from her dad, then it's kind of like,
it's not a great sign for me.
Yeah. And I'm looking through like some of the other, appointments and stuff. I mean, half the people that were in Trump's original team are either in, serving time or paying penalties or getting ready to pay penalties. And then the other half don't want to have anything to do with him. That doesn't bode well. And I mean, even if the public support was behind him, and I don't believe it is, I think it is going more to DeSantis from Florida, as at this time. Things can always change. But DeSantis seems to be a little bit more of a Trump light.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I kind of thought that Trump had an opportunity to basically be a funnel system for Trump-like politicians and use his kind of communication platform through that. So in this episode, I accidentally said that, I think if I remember, that Teddy Roosevelt went from being a Democrat to a bull moose. It was Republican to be a bull moose party. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's you compare those two situations. Teddy didn't have, he had the braggadociousness and the ability to communicate, but didn't have the media system that Trump has built because he didn't have a media system. And having kind of a framework as janky as it is has always been one of the biggest advantages the Democrats have had over the Republicans. So even though it's a janky system, I thought that Trump, if he was actually serious about building his influence for the long term, would build something like this because it would be sustainable and frankly, it'd probably help him out more financially and stuff, all the other benefits long term.
Well, financially, he's going to win out on this big time. The CPACs and stuff that are being created for this are basically going to go straight to his bank account.
But not all of it does. Like a lot of it also goes to the party. So if you're talking about he was doing fundraising for like some of the Senate candidates, I think Blake Masters and JD Vance and stuff, where it would be like a split. It was like 95-5 or 99-1, where he would send out a fundraising email. 99% of it would go to non-political candidates and 1% would go to them. And they still benefited immensely on the fundraising side for it.
Right. That's not what I was talking about. Sorry. I'm talking about like his specific one for him pushing for president.
Yeah.
But that brings up a really good point that I think does make a difference. Had the senators, specifically the U.S. Senate and even the House of Rep, if they would have been more like the Trump candidates, had they done a better job in this, the midterms that we just went through, I would say there might be a little bit more support for actual Trump moving forward as president again at the next election. The fact that even some strong Trumpers who were already in place had some pretty close calls in a state that had views that were like Marjorie Taylor Greene, the election was a lot closer than what it should have been for somebody in the area she was in.
Yeah, Lauren Boebert. I saw that
Lauren Boebert, like she
won
was
by a couple hundred votes.
Yeah. So that to me says, it actually speaks loud to me on a lot of areas, and this isn't necessarily for Democrats because I know one of our future things is about Pelosi, but I think politicians as a whole have not been listening to the public on what the public actually wants.
Yeah, that's pretty true.
And one of the things that I've saw constantly, and I don't watch political advertising, but I've paid more attention to politics this past 6 years, I think, than I ever thought I would. Like, I didn't think I cared about this stuff. Mm-hmm. I think Les is part of it, actually. Les Snyder. But
Les and Dave arguing over a meal about politics. You don't care about the children.
Someone at work said, like, well, I don't care. I mean, I don't even know who's running and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I get that. I was there. When I was your age, I was there. 10 years ago. But like, I see the things that they vote on now. I see, and part of it's this podcast, but even before this podcast, just seeing that the things that they vote on really do make a difference in how we live our day-to-day lives. But one thing I do want to point out about Teddy Roosevelt, this is actually probably the reason why he did not win the election against Taft. Mm-hmm. Was he told everybody he was going to be a one full-term president.
Yeah.
And he was not going to run again. And for 2.5 years, he promoted the crap out of Taft. I mean, he was saying Taft is
totally
my second coming. And then, now this is where it gets like debatable on what happened, but basically Roosevelt said something to Taft, and depending on whose account you go with, Taft did not respond in a way that Roosevelt felt was appropriate.
Yeah.
And got really offended by it, and then distanced himself. I mean, this part is all fact. He distanced himself from Taft and refused to contact him or be in contact with him, and then decided at the last minute, which again, elections back then, the whole thing took place over a 6-month period. Now, I mean, we do 2.5 years. But creates a party.
And it was much more intensive too.
And if I remember it correctly, his party still won like 35% of the vote.
Definitely.
I mean, and the Democrat at the time, I think only got like 5%. So it was a landslide for Taft, but had Roosevelt actually not talked about it as being a one-term president, I think that would have been a completely different turnaround. I mean, one, Taft would not have run because that story is actually cool. Taft turned down the Supreme Court 3 different times because of Roosevelt and Roosevelt's the person who Roosevelt succeeded, but because he was trying to serve his country best, even though he always wanted the Supreme Court, and he eventually got there. But just a really kind of cool story on that. And he was an interesting president, to say the least. But back to this. I think
just quick point on that. I think the difference is, because you made a stellar point. I 100% agree with you on the fact that he said that he didn't run. I do think that was the pivotal reason that he didn't lose. And thinking about this too, I was reflecting on the fact that now you can change kind of mindset a lot quicker with our media landscape and how technology is, that, their 6 months, the effect that they had in 6 months working through newspapers, going town to town in trains, doing, soapbox speeches for 15 minutes and going to the next town. That's a lot of freaking effort to change people's perceptions about you. But now, granted, Trump's not saying that he wasn't going to run again, but I still think, I think that this is still, this is a prediction. I predicted that it would be a couple days ago he would announce a new party. I still think this is in a play. And it just kind of, I think, goes, whether, I don't know his personal psychology, but watching the his announcement speech, Christy and I watched it. The guy seemed like he didn't really seem the energy that he had previously. And if someone had a gun to their head and had to announce a presidency that had kind of like that vibrant personality before, I mean, it kind of, for me, it felt that he feels like he has to run and doesn't really want to, watching that.
So, I mean, there's been lots of jokes and stuff made, even about his first presidential campaign, about why he did it. And this is one thing that's really cool. I mean, I will give Trump credit for this. In 2012, 2008, 2004, and 2000, there were people's like, oh yeah, he ran before. But he never actually announced candidacy until 2015 for the 2016 election. And that's the first time that he ever announced candidacy. Now, he flirted with candidacy a whole bunch, and he, in those other elections that I just mentioned, but he didn't announce. So when he finally announced, and one of his big things was, he would never announce unless he actually thought he had a chance to win the presidency. But even the 2016 one, I'm talking about multiple sources, like over 30 different people who were involved with that campaign. None of them except for Giuliani and maybe Roger Ailes. There's still debate on that one. I'm working on some stuff on that. But none of them thought he was legitimately going to win, especially after the whole privates incident. And that, so it was almost, I mean, and if you,
the grab him by the pee.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you take, I mean, this is just like, this is a master class. And if you don't think you're going to win, but your goal is to gain publicity, gain money, and you watch the 2016 campaign for Trump under that lens, like he's never expecting to win. So he's just doing anything and everything, except at that time, that particular place in history and space, people are like, finally, someone understands me. And so he starts rocketing in the polls. And even though I honestly don't believe you can ever put yourself in a competition type thing and not care at all about if you win or lose, especially something as high stakes as presidency. But I think they're like, we weren't even expecting to get the Republican nomination. And then,
I'm sure he was, though.
Yes and no. I mean, like the inner thoughts of people that have like said what he communicated to them during that time and stuff. It's like, yeah, his ego, yes, absolutely. But then he had some sense of reality because multiple people had reported, like the people close to him, the people that are close to Melania, mentioning how he didn't really feel like he was actually going to get it. And they're like, when's this joke going to be over, kind of thing. So he gets the election, and then you have the cluster of trying to put all these people in place because none of that was set down. But
also nobody would work with him. So
yeah,
so
when you do the campaign, he did.
I think historically with campaigns, devil's advocate here, right? But historically with campaigns, people are a known quantity. So whether you're on a local level or a federal level, there's people that are kind of talking to you about it. And for Trump, this was Roger Stone, from what I have read. He was kind of like the one for a long term that really cultivated this idea of Trump being president and was cultivating it behind the scenes because he knew that, or he thought that he could win. And
yeah, Roger Stone was the one that pushed for Trump even back in 2000 to run.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that you've got one guy that has, typically if you're going to be running for president, you have 20, 30, 40 people that are there basically working to get you to make a decision to run, and then they kind of fall into place. He didn't have that, and he went and got who he could get at a time, which was Paul Manafort, and that turned out how that turned out. But he was the only one that was willing to work with them, because you've got these two systems. You got one person that wants to break the system, and one person that wants, or the system that has been there for kind of forever. So it's kind of like, Trump saying that he wanted to fire a bunch of people at some random thing, say Veterans Affairs Administration. I doubt he said that, right? But you can't expect people to probably vote for you or support you if you're talking about firing everybody or throwing out the system and stuff.
Right.
So I think more than the lack of seriousness, I think that a lot of people had a lot to lose to align themselves with someone that the status quo felt was not serious, and that could potentially damage your earning prospects. So that's, devil's advocate on what you said, but that was kind of like an impression that I got at the time too.
And I don't think that's false. I mean, I think that is part of it as well. All the reason why I mentioned all this was that I think, like, one thing Trump does really well is he understands the heartbeat of a certain group of Americans, that, like, he really gets them, and he has no problem lying to them, like basically saying, like, hey, I'm exactly like you, just a million times richer, and I would never touch the stuff you guys touch. But I think it for him to start apart, especially after trying 2 or 3 times now to starting a separate social media to combat Twitter, and 2 of those have failed miserably, and the third one is kind of out to see what's going to happen with that.
What were the other 2?
Well, so one of them was his one that he ran himself that crashed. You have I don't remember the name of it. It was the one that it was earlier this year that he tried to start.
Isn't that the one that they're doing right now with Truth Social? I'm pretty sure he's only done one.
Well, he's done. So he was a big backer of Parler. Well, it's supposed to be pronounced parlay, but no one does. Even their companies like Parlay. And that one has, it's not working at all. Even in the channel.
But he wasn't a financial backer, though. He just was advocating for an alternative.
Right. But right after Parlay came out, he announced a social media network. It was not the Truth Social. I think it ended up getting morphed into what Truth Social is, but it was an attempt, and it did not. It failed pretty miserably. I'm pretty sure on this, but if I'm wrong, then I'm sure I'll be eating crow on this podcast later.
Literally,
no.
You have to catch it yourself.
Well, I'll catch.
You anyway, catch, I'll cut.
What I would like to say is that because of this failed attempt, especially with the midterms, with these attempts at social media, has not been going well. It's a lot harder to be the renegade starting a new party. If there was going to be a new Republican Party, it should have happened in 2018, maybe 2020, but it would have been the base of Republicans who are saying, we're not like Trump and we're not like this group. And instead, what we saw is all these people who were so anti-Trump completely flipping, and we're like,
well, and I think maybe you're interpreting that I think that they would win a coalition or something like that. I don't think that they would. I'm just talking about from a pure power sense and for what's best for Trump. Like, I felt him announcing a new party would be that, because he would essentially have control all over the cash. and not have to split that with, Republican leadership that hasn't been spending it in areas where he wants it, and he's, blamed them for his candidates losing.
Yeah, I get that sense, but I also look at it from, here's the sad reality, and this is one reason why, for good or for bad, the libertarians have had trouble. They are finally starting to gain some traction in the elections as a whole, but people, especially in the 9 states that have straight ticket voting, they're not going to change their party. Most of the people are going to stay Republican. So if you start a new party and it's not Republican, or it's not Democrat, they're not going to be like, oh, Trump started the Trump party. They're not going to just go en masse to switch. There'll be a group of them that definitely will. But
if you capture 20%, which, Trump's probably got 35% of voters that are big into him. And granted, you have to get on the ballots in all these states and stuff, but I don't really see it as a big hurdle as you, because personality is the big part. And I think if we were talking about anybody else, it wouldn't be possible. But you're talking about the cultural times right now are a similar mix when this has happened before. If it's going to happen, this would be a time to do it.
Well, I think the opportunity is lost. I think it should have happened in about 2010 is when I think it should have happened. If it was going to happen with this group of people, when the Tea Party was at its height, that was when it made sense to happen.
But there wasn't a figurehead.
Right.
That
and the
would
figurehead, unfortunately,
lead the party
as the Tea Party started dwindling. And I think that's why I'm saying it's not that I don't think it could have happened. I think we've missed the mark. Whereas you're saying that you think it still potentially could happen within the next couple of years, maybe. Or well, I'm saying couple. You didn't say couple.
I think that we're going through a incredibly chaotic time where our institutions are challenged.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I see,
baby. Woo.
Yeah, by both sides. So if you talk about, both sides, Republicans and Democrats, are taking efforts to outlaw certain things, whether that be books or otherwise, and like random things, and then calling the other party as anti-freedom. So we've really got this period right now where there's some very contrasting beliefs on stuff, and a lot of people that are kind of coalescing into certain cliquey groups built around ideology. I feel it's more prevalent now than it was in the last decade or two. So what I see, like part of the reason that I see over the next couple of years, going up to 2024, if we do have a major recession next year, that's going to be another element in there where Trump's like, hey, this is basically what I told you was going to happen. And that's a political statement and a political discussion that's not going to be really focused on numbers and long-term trends and stuff like that. But that's a really strong political point. So I just think about how much money he's raising, hundreds of millions of dollars, and he's having to allocate it and split it to other people that he doesn't really control, and wanting to control, if he wanted to build value for him and his family to be a political dynasty in the likes of a Kennedy or something like that.
Yeah.
Even though that's, not something that I really think is a necessarily a great thing for society. I think for the benefit for him. Like the landscape right now is an area where there's a lot of discontent, a lot of strife, a lot of chaos, and then you have a very strong personality that again is going to be able to say, I told you so. And a lot of people are going to really be like, he told us so. Like, look at these videos.
Okay. So,
and if it's like, I'm talking about the kind of environment now where I think that there's a lot of stuff mixing here that make it ripe for a personality like him to basically consolidate a lot of power and have the money and some of the technical background to actually pull it off.
okay,
And on the alternative, him running for president, I see that as him not, based on the demographics now, not having enough to get above 45% in the next election, probably losing it and then fading, from relevance.
what I would say, and this is historically and geographically, like this isn't just America. The best case scenario I could see for something like that to happen is Trump dies in the midst of all this, and whoever his top lieutenant is the one who takes and creates a Trump party. I mean, seriously, because this is what
like
this is what Stalin did.
Story of
This is what Stalin did with Lenin. And what's even more interesting about that is because Lenin did not like Stalin. In fact, so Lenin,
that's a good point.
And
that would
I think,
be interesting.
I think of the schools of theology and philosophy specifically, it was almost all the most famous people we hear in those terms. So like when we think of like who's the greatest philosopher and or who's the founder of philosophy, and even though Socrates is the one that everybody kind of says like it did it, Plato was the one who built the myth of Socrates.
Yeah.
And everything we hear from Socrates comes from a Platonic understanding. And in theology, the person that gets mentioned the most in kind of this part of the world is John Calvin and Calvinism. But John Calvin wouldn't have even been a Calvinist 20 years after his death. But his top follower, Philip Melanchthon, created things based on Calvin. And so Melanchthon was really the founder of Calvinism. But I see this being happening in lots of things. So I can see.
Well, it's very typical in science too.
So someone like I don't know who it would be, because it would probably be someone we don't expect. Like we could imagine, Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz being that kind of person.
Kind of who I thought was, I don't really know a lot about her, but Carrie Lake, she seemed to pick up the torch of the ideological stuff. So when I was thinking about how this would play out, and you make a good point, like I didn't think about that, the death and kind of a coalesce around that, but I thought it kind of saw it playing out as either him declaring a new party or declaring for president and then getting all this money funded up in an entity where it can be funneled into something that would support a new party, and then bringing in candidates like Carrie Lake and other loyalists that are maybe I personally don't know a lot about her. I've seen her in a couple of interviews. She's a brilliant speaker, a very aggressive debater too.
Yeah.
I don't really know what she supports. It's kind of like third party, but comparing her to a lot of the other, Matt Gaetz or Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think it's a very different presentation of her than those others. And so when I saw it, like I'm seeing this develop like a movie, right? And seeing Trump building his power and developing people like Carrie Lake that look the part, sound the part, and then can bring the ideology in there and really reinforce that. That's a stronger playbook, I see for him consolidating power in his family long term. But I think maybe that framing of him wanting to consolidate power is the wrong framing for this discussion in the first place. But if so versus some other stuff, he just wants to win, or he's bitter that he lost last time.
I'm personally of the opinion, and I still think this holds true. I don't think he wanted to run for any of the 3 elections. The one that he won, the one that he lost, and then if he runs in 2024 officially. I'm not talking about I know he's announced candidacy, but there's a difference, and we've kind of talked about it. We'll see what he actually does on the campaign, and we'll see what kind of stuff happens.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I would love to go in this further, but I don't want it feels, it's hard to talk about this in a non-political way because there is so much politics and other stuff that gets involved.
Well, his policies are very popular, but his personality is not popular. Even the people that are a lot of the people. So I'm trying to think of the people that are strong supporters of Trump that I know. I can't think of any of them that enjoy his personality, but they really like his policies. I'm talking about me personally.
Yeah. I'm
people that I'm close to.
I'm thinking about people I know, and I would say almost the exact opposite.
Yeah,
they don't even know what his policies are, but they're like, I love that man.
Yeah,
but I feel like we need to end this discussion.
All right. Yeah, let's end it
because it's one that we will definitely be reflecting back.
If you would like to learn more about the New Next podcast, find us at thenewNextPodcast.com, where you can suggest a topic you would like for us to cover. If you enjoyed what you heard, share the podcast, tell a friend about it, or rate us with 5 stars.